So I've read one or two things about you, and I was quite upset when I read an article you wrote about your childhood. For someone who's spent 20 years working with children, I've seen many dysfunctional families. I've seen many parents who never should be allowed to have children, shouldn't be allowed to have a dog, could have treated their kids that badly. I'm not saying that's in your case, but you had a very challenging childhood, and part of that was you confused about. It seemed as if you were confused at parts about your own gender. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Could you talk about that for a few minutes?
Well, that's right, and I have written about it. It is out there. I'll mention one website which it's on, which is Peak Trans website. You can read my story on there, and I have talked about it on other podcasts. So it's not a secret. Both my parents are dead, so I'm free to talk about them. And yeah, I have said in the past, I think my own gender dysphoria was a product of PTSD following an abusive and a very unhappy childhood. So when I was young, I was running away from home, spending as little time at school as possible, skiving from school. I wouldn't go as far as to say falling in with the wrong crowd because I was too young, but I would just skive off school and go off into the countryside and hardly do anything. It's a miracle how I got past my O-levels at all. Dropped out of school at 16, didn't have higher education. So yeah, and that was all a product of this dysphoria, which a lot of people calling gender dysphoria, but a lot of people are just calling body dysmorphia or dysphoria. Because you could also include all the girls who think they're anorexic, who are anorexic, and other things like autism. People who do not feel comfortable as they're growing up in their own body, don't feel that they belong here in the world. They feel completely isolated.
How did you feel? How did all this present itself to you?
I grew up believing that I was a boy, right up until puberty, because my father brought me up as if I was a boy. So he brought myself and my brother up in the same way. He took us to barber shop to get short back and sides together. He took us to football together. In fact, he took me a lot more than he took my brother because he thought my brother was a sissy, right? So I was much more treated as the boy than my brother was in many ways. And I had all boys' toys. I had Action Man. Space. I was massively interested in space and yeah, boys' things completely. Boys' comics. I honestly believed, before puberty came along, I honestly believed that when I was 18, I would grow a beard, be 6 foot tall and join the army. I honestly believed that. Right? I really believed that. That was my picture of what my world was going to be like. I didn't see the reality of my life where I was actually a disabled child who would never be capable of doing anything like that, So you could say that I was deliberately blotting out the reality of what my life was really like, yeah?
Could you say that part of that, because your childhood was so unhappy, that you were trying to do anything you could do to make your father happy?
Yeah, even though I would have always said I hated my father and I was frightened of him. But yes, at the back of your mind, you're trying to make your parents love you, aren't you? Regardless of how you feel about them, And puberty comes along and it's like being hit over the head with a brick. You suddenly realize that you've been living this fantasy up until that point, especially as I lived in a family where I was told nothing about puberty. So some families are a lot closer. My family was not a close family. I was unlucky that way, I didn't get any preparation for what life was going to be like or anything.
It's strange when you're a child, when you see how other families interact and how they live as a family. I came from a very loving family. The first thing I do when I walk into my mum's house now is hug her and kiss her. And that's always been the case.
There was none of that at all in my family, nothing like that at all.
Well, I had a girlfriend many years ago in my early 20s, and she had a child. And I was surprised that she never ever hugged and kissed him. She fed him and cleaned him, and he was, he wasn't abused, but there was never any physical contact or love or hugs or kisses, and it used to blow my mind.
You've probably heard of children being disassociated, not just from their own body, but from their family, from everything around them. And I was like that, because I would go to friends' houses that were just what you've described, where they were all happy and loving and all laughing together, and the parents playing with the children. And I felt like an alien from another planet, Nick. I honestly felt like an alien from another planet. I used to think all the people walking around me were just androids, not real people. Yeah. And you could say that comes from watching Doctor Who and so on, but I honestly felt that disassociated. And one of the stories I've told is that when I was walking home from the bus from school, where I used to walk home down the country lanes to where we lived, I always felt that when I turned around the corner, my house wasn't going to be there, that it would just be fields, there would be no houses. And that was a very, very strong image that was in my mind. And that was because I just didn't feel that I really was part of it all, you know? And I think...
And wasn't happy there. So
I think
why would you want your home to be there when that home has there's no happiness in there whatsoever?
And I have to be honest with you, Nick, I've almost never dared to go back in 60 years. And I did go back there when I was having a country walk, and I thought, I'm going to walk past my old house. And even today, it would give me the shivers. And we're talking about 50 years later. Do you understand what I mean? So it just gave me the shivers, as if it was walking past a haunted house, you know? So
it represents nothing but unhappiness to you.
So I consider it all as a product of PTSD, and I don't care what other people call it or where they think it originates, but that's where I think it originated with me.